she got killed. They came in, they tried to serve a search warrant. They found no narcotics, no money, no anything. Um, so now this is when we start to get into the case and see exactly what the discrepancies, because they're justified and they're doing because like Adam, you were saying earlier, they deem these people as criminals. They've targeted this house, so right there, you're in their mind, they're like, we're just going to do what we do, get the quote unquote bad people. You know what I'm saying? So that no knock warrant, which they got, and then like you said, I didn't even know the report that they said they changed it and then they had to knock, which was real significant because of relation to the boyfriend Kenneth Walker shooting, because he's saying he didn't hear anything. So they said they heard loud banging. Like we were saying, recap, Breonna said, who this? They kind of come out of the bedroom, come into the hallway, living room area, the door flying off the hinges. Of course, that's what he's saying. The report, he fires a warning shot, and then they saying, okay, they got fired upon. They start shooting back. He said he didn't hear anything. That's why he's thinking he's protecting themselves. Law enforcement are telling people, no, we let people know. So that's a big point in the case, because obviously if they're basically saying we let him know and he shot at law enforcement, it's real easy to justify, you shooting at an officer.
The subsequent,
that's a big thing about, did they knock? This is like the first major discrepancy in the case. Did they knock or did they not knock? And you're getting some testimonies from the neighbors saying, yeah. You're getting some more than just one that's saying no, they didn't. Now, second big thing in the case, the officer said he got shot. They said it was Kenneth Walker's gun. Later on, we got some information, also an article. Ballistics don't support the Attorney General's claim. Article USA Today and also ABC News that it was Mr. Walker's bullet from his gun. They said they did. The Kentucky State Police did examine it, and the ballistic evidence was not enough, either concrete evidence or nothing, not enough basically evidence to say for sure that came. The ballistic evidence did not match up to say that came from his gun. Then they also have, which Charles referenced, the Courier Journal, which is the local media working with USA Today. They publicized reports from his lawyer saying that they got records from Louisville Metro Police Department that said one of the officers was issued a 9mm gun. All the officers saying it couldn't have been our gun because the whole department uses 40 calibers. So they're saying like we all have 40 calibers. It couldn't have came from us, but there's a record that one of the officers were issued a 9mm gun. By the police department. But, from there, they're saying, no, there are other people saying it's a possibility, but they're saying there's no way to tell because there's a gap between the times. So if they may have, because some people are alleging friendly fire, they could have changed the gun. Or if not, they're just basically saying the dude shot them and then we shot back. So these are the first major discrepancies, but at least up to like Adam was saying, the charges were dropped because obviously they were like,
it's not so the burden of proof on something like that, I imagine, is pretty high, at least for intent.
No guy with a black dude like that with a criminal background who shoots a police officer in the leg is getting off. I'm sorry,
right?
It's not happening.
Right, unless there's not enough evidence. There's just not enough.
I mean, maybe I'm, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but it just sounds inconclusive. It wasn't confirmed that the gentleman shot the cop, but it also wasn't rejected either. So it's kind of up in the air.
Yeah, it's not reasonable. They can't make the burden of reasonable doubt in either direction.
All right.
And also, and then do you have the alleged one side saying, yeah, the boyfriend saying he fired a warning shot, but he was like he didn't shoot the officer. That's what he's saying.
Although no one debates that he fired at least one round, right? That's not. No one's debating that, I don't think.
Yeah, and again, I'm not saying that he did or didn't shoot him. I'm not. I don't know that, but I just meant more. If they thought they had even a small chance of getting the guy, and they had like the proper evidence, he was definitely going to get. He was going to get gone after, right? Like that doesn't happen. You don't shoot cops and they let it go.
Yeah.
No one, right?
You're already a target on a warrant. You're already a target on a warrant.
There's no chance. No chance.
This is a complete tangent, so apologies and course correct me if you feel necessary. But part of what I perceived as a big issue here is just the extreme amount of time that passed after this happened before things started happening in terms of accountability and pushing that envelope. That seemed a little suspect, no? And that wasn't in the timeline, but I think is an important part of this conversation.
Yeah, and it should have been included. There was a lot of information to cover.
What do you mean when you say that, Matt? Are you talking about between like the actual event and them like looking to prosecute, or like the event of like them knocking, the shooting, calling medical? Like, which one are you referring to?
I think the disturbing trend that I personally associate with a lot of these occurrences is that it seems that until the press gets a hold of it, there's not a lot of movement.
Oh, okay. So that's what you mean.
And I think that's something that harms the standing of government and law enforcement, because I feel like
and trust, with those organizations.
Something like that happens. I feel like you need to like immediately shift to transparency, accountability, and timeliness. I think those are important ingredients to handle a situation like this.
And just coming off of that real quick, man. Like that's a good observation. It's something that's you see a lot. This happens a lot. This is a history and a pattern. Well, not just, we're not talking about Louisville law enforcement, just law enforcement, period. A lot of things, once the media gets a hold of it, or once it starts to get a big attention, you start to see stuff happen that you would think just on proper protocol that would have happened. Already, no, this is a popular narrative. So we got to keep that in mind. When somebody's always acting to that manner, you're like, what's you hiding, or what's really going on? You know what I'm saying? So just keep that in mind. Not to sway anybody, just to keep the reality of how people operate. This is something that me and Charles were talking about when we met. Like any type of discussions when we get into certain facts and data, I feel that it was real important that we remember how the nature of people operate. People do slick, slimy, shiesty, deceive, lie. That's what people do. Regardless of the subject, what we're talking about, we have to calculate that, people have agendas and stuff. Nobody's just, for the most part, it's just what goes on. It's the nature of people. People lie, they're going to hide, they're going to curve. This is a popular pattern. Like, as soon as we start heating up, you're like, oh, let's look into it. It's always happening like that. So,
and then when you look at it from the standpoint of historically, see, we're now in the information age. There was a time where you could sweep so much under the carpet to where the dirt and the carpet, you can't tell the difference because you didn't have the access to the information. But now that we're in this information age, everyday people have access to just loads of information, and you were able to have discussions like this. It's like, wait a minute, if that's the case, then this, because all of the data that's available, and you can weigh it out. And it's like, wait a minute, this is not making sense. When before they were just used to, this is the police report. The police said it. It's the truth. Move on. So that's one of the areas that we have to look at now. Is what we're dealing with is that we're in this information age, and because media is now a much broader thing because of the internet. Before you had once upon a time ago, the 3 stations, and that was it. CBS, NBC, whatever the third one was, and so you have just a multitude of platforms, a multitude of just these sources of information now. So that which law enforcement did consistently operate in and was able to maintain a certain level of so-called trust in a number of communities, it's not there anymore.
I do think, I don't have a stance on it, but I think that I can't personally identify an agenda specifically targeted against, the Black community here. Perhaps maybe an agenda about protecting police from scrutiny and accountability. Now, I'm not saying it's either or, but, the agenda, I think, is kind of we're not sure what the specific agenda is and who it's targeted at.
I think this is probably a good place to start the hypotheticals, right?
Yeah.
I think this is where we're going to get into some real good value, is that we don't need the facts because we can go off of hypotheticals, right? So let's assume for a moment that the police did not try to identify themselves, right? And hold that as a variable for the sake of discussion. And things play out the way they did. what can we assume their motivation was for serving, say, the warrant? Do we trust the motivation for serving the warrant?
I'm not sure I'm following the question.
Like, do the police genuinely think that they're investigating narcotics?
I think that that they are, because obviously when they went to the other house and they found drugs and stuff like that in the car, so no, they got some kind of information around it. One of the big things to point out is I think that how they put together the affidavit, and actually I forgot about the time stuff, man. I made some new cards and stuff, man. My bad.
Okay.
Hold on,
Those
man.
are legit, by the way.
We're supposed to be timing, man. My bad. I'll keep some time so we can try to keep some order. So it's like, okay, they're looking for something, but it's just what's questionable, at least from my perspective and just my experience and my history and just in life, how they validate their warrants and affidavits. For instance, one of the key points was, Jamarcus Glover, the ex-boyfriend and main suspect, he was getting mail packages. They said allegedly at Breonna Taylor's home. Media spoke with a local U.S. postal inspector and the jurisdiction in which Miss Taylor's address falls under, and he said they actually went to them in January. And they were like, according to reports, that the home was not receiving any type of suspicious packaging. Then there was reports that they went to another postal inspector and they told them, yeah, it was. So this one postal inspector that I'm referring to, I think his name was Tony something, Warren, I think, and he's over that particular jurisdiction which her house falls under. He was like, it's highly unlikely that they will go to another U.S. postal inspector in the area that doesn't cover that area. And he was like, according to his information, his time being there, his experience, if that were possibly the case, for sure he would have heard about it. Or they would have checked in with them to be like, hey, this is in your jurisdiction. So he was like, the U.S. postal inspector came out, was like, we didn't tell law enforcement that they were receiving suspicious packaging. But this is the information that they use to add fire to the fuel in order to go in and say, let's just go in and they got drugs in here. Of course, we saw that at the end, there were no drugs, no money, no anything. So this is why you can get bogus information, or you can either just fabricate information, either or. The facts are the facts that no drugs were there. The postal inspector said, no, we didn't say any suspicious package for going there, but you can actually put this into the report and you can use this as ammo when the judge see it to be like, hey, this is going to actually add on, sign off on the warrant. Next thing you go in there, somebody's dead. So this is just some of the things we mean about as far as the police officers and saying like, hey, they were definitely dealing with drugs. This is what's going on. And at the end of the day, they're like, oops, no, my bad. Nothing was going on. So just throwing that out there.
I guess the root of my question is more based on just like the sort of the simple optics, right? Public outrage is, I think if you could put it in a sentence, is that police murdered Breonna Taylor. Like that's what's on shirts, that's what's on the internet, that's what people are chanting. I think when people say her name, they're like, let's acknowledge that the police murdered this woman.
Right, and murdered, and that there needs to be some accountability in place. Those that murdered her need to be held accountable. And that's the biggest outrage. It's like you have the outrage of her being murdered, but then, there's no words to describe someone being murdered, and then the murderer gets to just walk away and have their life and also stay in the position to do it again.
So, but are we in agreement that she was murdered? Because that murder requires intent. And that's why I was asking, that's why my initial question was, assuming the police did not announce themselves, right? Like, because again, we can't prove that, but let's assume for a second that they didn't. Does that equal intent to kill Miss Taylor?
Yeah, but at that point, I thought, guys, but that's what.
You're breaking up, Rich.
Yeah, Rich, we're losing you, buddy.
Yeah, we lost.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah,
we got you now.
Sorry about that, fellas. Yeah, I guess that was, and Charles, you kind of summed up the point that I think that I was going to make. I don't think that it's clear, and I think it's sort of the point of this call that we to sort of establish, or rather have some conversation about what facts are confirmed, what aren't, and then determine whether or not determine, but just have a discussion about whether or not we can determine what intent really was. For me, independent of what the intent was, if what Adam said was true, about them like getting a sort of different kind of warrant, to me, again, it's clear that they didn't handle it. At the very, very least, they didn't handle the situation the right way and should be held accountable for that. I don't know.
Assuming that they didn't announce themselves, you mean? Assuming they didn't announce themselves.
Right. I think we're proceeding. They did not announce themselves. Correct.
Right.
That's the premise we're under right now.
And for me, that should be to assign anything else to it, I think is presumptuous, but not just presumptuous, but it's like it doesn't do any good for the outcome, right? I understand why we're assigning some of these other things, like in relation to how this might, like their intentions or her being a Black person or some of these other things that we're associating with the case. But at the end of the day, in terms of like accountability, if accountability is what we're really after, then that should be our primary and secondary focus, right? Holding them accountable for the things that we know that they didn't do right. So
absolutely, yeah. And I just want to jump in here and just kind of flag something.
I know we're starting to get wound up, so I'm gonna definitely keep track of at least some time in hand.
So, my bad if I went over. Sorry, fellas.
No, you're good. We're good.
No, I should have put my hand up.
I know we're starting to get into it, so just to keep it orderly much as we can,
I've been had my hand up, Charles.
Yeah, Matt,
get in there. My bad.
Yeah, Matt had his hand up. He did.
All right, so I think and I want to particularly point out this is a tragedy, and this is an awful thing, and I think that we have to preface. I have to preface what I'm about to say with that, and forgive me if the way I try to simplify this is insensitive to any degree, but I think if you look at what happened here, like there's so much nuance to it. There's so much controversy about the nuance. And to me, in looking at it, it's pretty simple. Warrant, knock, shots fired, return fire. I think that the sequence of how this played out, I think makes sense with what was happening. What is unacceptable is police officers blindly firing into a residential complex.
Right.
No, this is not a war zone. This is not the battleground. This is a residence, and where a lot of other people live in close proximity. So I don't think anything warrants or justifies them spraying up an apartment. And I think that the crux of this issue is, and I'm going to blank on the actual technical term, but it's like that like when police do something in the heat of the moment, they're not accountable to it.
Yeah.
And I think that is wildly inappropriate. And I feel like when you're not accountable for what you do, what are we even doing? If I cut corners and sell some memberships, I work in the gym industry. If we sell memberships unethically and I am discovered, I will be fired. That's how that plays out. And we're not even talking about life and death. We're talking about membership sales for a gym. So if we're talking about matters of life and death, firearms, for there to be no accountability is the fundamental nature of this issue and what needs to be addressed to stop this from happening again. It has nothing to do with anything else other than no accountability for spraying up somebody's apartment.
Yeah, and then we got Charles, and we got Adam, then we got Steve.
So, Matt, what Matt said was basically what I was going to lead into. But I wanted to kind of get us going when I asked that initial question about intent is because I wanted us to kind of work through it in a methodical way. And basically, I feel like the public, let's start from the beginning here. I agree with Matt, right? I don't think these people were like, all right, I want to see a Black woman die today. I don't think anybody wanted anything like that to happen. I think these people thought that they were doing police work. I think what's up for debate is the quality of that police work, which to me seems tragically poor. This seems like C+, or rather C-, D+ police work by people who either poorly trained. I would even go as far as to question the IQs of the people involved. And there's obviously some opportunity for that to be improved, because if these people are going to be charged with using weapons and protecting citizens, like, they need to be smarter and they need to govern themselves differently. But the reason that I started where I started was because the public at large on this issue was looking for, and still to this day is looking for, murder charges against people, right? There's a feeling about intent and about the sort of the hunting down of in this case, a Black woman, and killing her in cold blood. And I think no matter what happens to these officers, even if they go after them for being careless or doing crappy police work, or whatever it is, I don't know that anything was going to please the public in terms of an outcome less than murder charges. And I guess that's really what I wanted to flag, was that I don't think under any circumstance, given what we've seen here that we've listed, murder is what's on the table.
Yeah, I'll say, I think you have to think of intent differently, right? Like, I think when you guys are all thinking about it, you're thinking of it from the perspective of, they woke up that morning, pulled on their badge, and they're like, I'm gonna go shoot me a Black woman in the face. That's not necessarily how you could think about it, right? Like, or you don't have to, you could be guilty of murder without waking up that day with that thought, right? Like, you can have a certain level of reckless disregard for a certain community's life that your actions do elevate to the level of murder, right? So, like, I'm going to use like a random example, right? Like, let's say you're super drunk, you're a million times over the limit, and you go jump in your car and you're speeding down the highway and you run into another car and you kill somebody. Did you intend to kill somebody? By like the Webster's dictionary definition of it, probably not, right? You were just trying to get home. But like, your actions elevated to the point of recklessness that you can say that, yeah, no, you murdered that person because you did all the steps that increase the likelihood of something like that happening, to the point that you can be charged with intent and being guilty of trying to murder an individual. And I think that's the importance of the question here with regards to, one, whether they actually did or didn't announce themselves. Because if you're walking into a place like this and recklessly shooting into it and you haven't followed the proper procedures, then you are escalating to the point of, or arguably, right? You're arguably, negligent, grossly negligent, to the point where you are intending to hurt somebody because you're not following like those basic tenets and rules that are put in place so that something like this doesn't happen. Right, that the rules are there for a reason. Sorry, you're raising your hand. Go ahead.
No, we got.
Sorry, I just don't know if he saw him, so it's not to interrupt you.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
No, we're doing 2.5 minutes, so you got about 30 seconds if you want.
That's all good. I mean, I think you guys got it.
Okay, yeah, we got Steve now, and then we got Matt, and then we got Charles, and then we got.
Because it's just a thing of it's just a thing of where I mean, it just kind of piggybacking on what you're saying. With intent. Was Breonna Taylor, again, Breonna Taylor wasn't on their mind. Black woman wasn't on their mind. It's just that when you have this, and you see it, this difference in law enforcement with Black communities and Black and brown communities, that's just blatant. And you see in them video and time again, then it's the thing of like, okay, I don't have to specifically say I'm going to do this. It's just the attitude going in. The attitude going in. Exactly. And see, this is the thing about being careless. When it's the thing of where I like to make the comparison to nonprofits, because I've seen a lot of nonprofits at this, to where they deceitfully, where they can almost legally steal. And they're so used to doing it to where you can use funds for your personal use and just write it off in your organization. So that becomes a common practice. And so when you have the attitude that, that you don't have to, that you're not held to a higher standard in the Black community, Black and brown communities, and this is just the attitude going in, you're going to handle it. You're not going to handle the people as precious as you would for those that you value. So you have this devaluing attitude, the devaluing mentality going in. This criminal mindset, this mindset that, okay, the area is criminal. You know, and I look at that from the neighborhood that I grew up in, because it was deemed a criminal area, in North Greenwood and Clearwater. So regardless of how productive you were as a person in that community, you still looked upon that and treated as such. So again, with law enforcement's attitude towards the community,
30.
that speaks to the approach, and that also speaks to how careless you'll be. And you don't see it as being careless, because you see it as being prudent law enforcement, because this is what's expected of it.
Yeah. So now we got Matt, then we got Charles, then we got Richard.
No, I think there's a lot of truth in what Steve said. I think that a comment and a question. I think going back to one of the things I said earlier, I think it's the time lapse in accountability here, or just clarification on how this was being handled, that I think severely eroded the trust. I think to the extent that it's almost not recoverable. I don't know if there's any way you look back at this and feel like law enforcement, and look, tragedies happen, but I think it displays severe negligence and incapability in managing this once it happened. And I think the amount of time it took to get any sort of traction with this is wildly unacceptable. But I think, and the question I have more for Adam, I think, I would think that, and part of the issue I've had with this is, I don't know if, and Adam, correct me if I'm wrong, can you choose to press charges and make what happened a crime? Because right now what happened isn't a crime, technically, right? Because there is no accountability in the heat of the moment, where does the precedent that this was a crime develop? Where does that occur, Adam?
Well, you mean what were they like going to charge them with in terms of?
You can't say, well, because what happened was a tragedy, what you did was illegal, and I'm going to hold you accountable for it.
Yeah, but I don't think that's what they're doing. I think what they're saying is, there's certain procedures that are put in place to protect both police officers and the public, and part of those deal with the issuing of warrants and how you're to proceed when you're executing those warrants. And if you have a warrant that says that you need to, go in, identify yourself, X, Y, Z, and you don't follow by those procedures, and the natural result, or the consequential result from those actions end up with someone getting murdered, then you should suffer the consequences for not following by those procedures. And that's why I think when you listen to the snippets from the grand jury testimony, why they were so focused on that, right? Why they were like, hey, no, man, we knocked. We said it. We announced ourselves as police, because I know, and I know the district attorney or the attorney general knew that a lot of their case hinged on that, right? Because if they went in and they had a warrant that said that you needed to knock, then they go to that door and they didn't knock, and they rush in, and this person's a licensed gun owner thinking someone's breaking into their house, shoots back. It's kind of like, I'm twisting a legal principle here, but it's kind of like fruit of the poisonous tree, right? Like, you started this off wrong. And so everything that kind of happened after this, there was like a very natural consequence from you effectively not going with your warrant. It's kind of your fault, right? Like, you were supposed to go in, knock, introduce yourselves or announce yourselves, instead of going in the middle of the night at someone's house, knocking down the door. That's why people own guns, right? Like, that's why people have guns in their homes, to protect themselves from people breaking down the door in the middle of the night and, some shit happening. Got to announce yourselves. And I think that's what, like, that main grand jury testimony was like hinging on, is whether they actually did that or not. And that's why you have so much witness testimony saying one versus the other.